we are now called to order, and Chapel Groves. Did I see? Are we missing Chapel Groves? Mr. Gentry, I've heard you pray before. Could I call on you?
He is really good.
I know. Could I call on you tonight?
You're welcome to call on me. Thank you for giving me this privilege.
No, you can't start. I've heard that speech before.
He does have a calling.
Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together this evening. Thank you for giving us the privilege and the honor and the desire and the pleasure to do the work of Erlanger Health System. We recognize and realize that the mission and vision of this organization is grand. We recognize and realize that the mission and vision is bigger than any one of us, and we aspire to live up to that mission and vision. Give us the strength, the courage, and the need to live out our lives at Erlanger Health System, to assist and embrace those that need us at such a vulnerable moment in their lives. Give those that do the clinical work the special touch, the hands, the mind, and the spirit to care for those and to love those who need them. Bring us all together collectively so that we can do the best for this community, the best for our patients, and the best for Erlanger Health System. In His name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Guest, I think Jose, you might be our only guest tonight. Welcome.
Thank you, Don.
We'll hear from Jose with Sullivan Cotter here in a few minutes. And even though your agenda says that we'll have a quality and safety patient presentation from Dr. Blake, I think Dr. Cofer made it back in town on time, and we're going to hear from Dr. Cofer.
Once again, it's a pleasure to be here. I've been on the job now for 2 months, and sometimes I feel like I'm drinking from a fire hose. The scope of what we have to deal with is huge, but this is meant to be a brief report. I thought I'd go over some of the things we've started today. We've been focusing very early on the food service because there's been a change, Aramark to Sodexo. It's the right moment. They're fresh. And it's one of the biggest dissatisfiers our patient has is the quality of the food, house delivered, et cetera. So we're working on very specifically, we're meeting with Evelyn Vance and her people every Monday at 9 o'clock. If any of the trustees want to attend, you're welcome to. And we go over very granular issues. We're trying to get the food up there on time to all the floors. We've suggested and they've agreed to start surveying the patients daily on what the patients perceive as quality of their food. And the nurses don't have to fill that out, by the way. The Sodexo people are going to do that. We're focusing very heavily on 2 specific nursing units, 3000 and North Wing 8, trying to pour resources into those units to see if we can improve the patient satisfaction scores and then take what we've learned from those units and export it. We now have a dietary hotline. One of the biggest complaints of the nurses for years have been they need food. They don't know who to call. They call, nobody answers. We now have a number that's answered, and somebody brings them the food. The Sodexo is going ahead with some needed automation, trying to buy some equipment that's going to make the menus automated, much like you'd have an iPad, and the patient will punch some things, and that automatically goes down electronically from the menu. Now we're dealing with paper. As you can imagine, it's very cumbersome. And I have to be honest, the issues between Aramark and Sodexo aren't helping us any. We need to get that resolved. I know there's steps being taken to do that, but we need to get that issue resolved, and we need to get the cafeteria built out. We've started meeting bi-monthly as a group. The 4 main heads of the quality department are meeting twice a month. Jan Keys and I have been, and others have been rounding on the floors, going into patients' room, visiting the nurses, showing our face, dealing with immediate problems. We're still very much focused on the big 6, and I won't read these, but we've gone over these before. Flu vaccine is one of the hot topics right now. This is a difficult subject. You think it'd be very easy, but we have heart surgeons refusing to let their patients be vaccinated. We have individual surgeons and doctors refusing this and refusing that, and they really can't do that. But the nurses can't be intimidated, so we're having to deal with these individually, come up with a way to not miss anybody. As simple as just making sure everybody on the floor has been vaccinated isn't necessarily easy. Some people that are observation don't need the vaccine. The people that are admitted do. The nurses have come up with some novel ideas. For example, why not give them the vaccination in the ER? If we're not going to be admitted and they're waiting down there for 6 hours or 8 hours, let's vaccinate them then. That was the nurse's idea. The issue is still, has the patient had the vaccine, yes or no? Where is it documented? How is it documented? How do we find that? Well, the nurse had a great idea. Let's come up with colored wristbands. If they've gotten it, we give them a blue color. If they've refused it, we give them a green color, for example, and just document that right there on the patient's wrist. We're working specifically in that access to deal with these issues of documentation, which field gets clicked, refused, got it, when, and then the next day, all those have to be repopulated. So if you have a patient in the hospital several times, it confuses the nurses. So these are all very granular, boots on the ground issues we're dealing with. But the good news is we hope to, in the next 4 to 6 weeks, actually have refrigerators on the floor to store vaccine. And that way the nurses can just go and get a shot and give it and not have to wait on pharmacy. Just take them out of the loop. I did want to show this to the board. We have an organizational chart. I don't expect you to be able to read that from where you are, but I want you to know that we have one. There are many holes there. Dr. Jackson's coming 1 December. He and I have been talking about the qualifications for the Senior VP of Patient Safety. We have a job description now that we got last week. Jan Keys and I are looking at that. We hope to hire that person sometime in the next few weeks. And we have some very specific asks on here. I'm asking for more people, specifically more nurse educators, engineers, project managers. And we don't have a budget. We need a budget. So this is all coming, I think. But after 2 months of being here, it's been a lot of fun. But there's a whole lots of stuff we got to fix. We can make better. Now the good news is, I think the nurses are very appreciative that somebody's coming to their floor, talking to them. I got an email from a nurse today about an issue sitting in the Madison airport. You know, she's got this issue. They're emailing me with these issues. I mean, this is not our culture in the past. It's just to put your head down and keep going. We're trying to affect change. We do need an organized department. We need a budget, and I think we will eventually get there. But this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. Any questions? Thank you.
Dr. Coker, I probably asked this last month, but how long before you will be able to see measurable change from your efforts? You've been here, what'd you say, 2 months?
Well, so
I mean, you've been in this role 2 months. But.
So, for example, we got this last week the HCAP scores for August.
Right.
So a lot of the data we get is 2 months behind. Some of the data we get is 1 month behind. I think to really see any change that perhaps I can take credit for, and you got to realize there's a lot of people up here. It's not just me. Woods Blake is a valuable partner, and I've been out of town for 3 days. Woods has done everything I should be doing, and when he's out of town, I do. We're joined at the hip. And many of the people that exist that are on this chart have been here for years doing this. So a lot of people are trying to make a change. But I think it's realistic to hope that in 6 to 8 months I can say that we've done some different. But, you know.
So by the end of this fiscal year, we should be able to start seeing some.
I hope so. You know, I've never really done this before exactly like this, so I'm learning on the job. But I'm encouraged that there's a lot of enthusiasm. And I think that people sense things are different. It's not the same old way. And I'm hoping 6 to 8 months.
Well, you've got the board's support. I know that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Paul, can you turn this off?
Moving on down the agenda, you received the September 24th minutes in your package. If I could hear any changes, corrections, otherwise I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign.
Look how many pages it is.
Our committee reports, Budget and Finance did not meet this month. Joint Conference, Dr. Moore.
We met, no report.
Planning Committee,
We did not meet.
Legal and Audit. Where's Mike?
Audit compliance.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Okay, Audit and Compliance.
We met today, thank you.
Yes, and Legal Committee,
We did not meet.
Management Board Evaluation.
We met last month and we have items on the agenda.
Thank you. And Personnel did not meet, so, and I should have said, Budget and Finance, while we didn't meet, Mr. Tabor's going to give us a update here in a minute. So with that, we'll move on down to new business, and we have one resolution this evening. I don't think we have a consent calendar
We do
this
not.
month. We do not. So we're going to have one resolution on the regular calendar.
Yep.
So Ms. Stanley, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. I'd first like to invite our guest from Sullivan Cotter, managing partner Jose Faguaga, if you would take us through your findings. Jose will share with the full board what the MBEC has seen in terms of the review, the CEO salary review that we recently conducted. And you'll have a chance to ask him some questions, and then I will take it from there.
Very good.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good evening. I'm going to present the recommendation for the CEO's salary adjustment, as that recommendation has been developed and prepared and submitted by the Management Committee the Management Board Evaluation Committee for the board's consideration. But before I get into the specifics of that recommendation, I want to spend some time discussing the framework within which the committee went through its deliberations and made its decisions. And then I want to spend a little time on the rationale before getting into the specifics. And so this committee, the MBEC committee, follows a disciplined executive compensation governance process. And at the root of all this is Erlanger's executive compensation philosophy. And what this is a formal declaration of how this board intends to go about its business of compensating its executives. And there are two cornerstones on which this philosophy is based on. One is pay for performance, and the other is market-based pay. So pay for performance is fairly straightforward, and that is that no action that the board will consider, can be considered without some evaluation and assessment of either the individual's performance or the organization's performance. Okay, so performance is at the heart of the compensation decision. That is different for executives than it is generally for workforces in the industry, and also here, where in many instances compensations are adjusted solely based on a position that falls behind market, and then all those individuals in that job class are adjusted really without regard to how well individuals in that job class are performing. So it's a very different standard and a very different approach for executives. The second point is that it is market-based. And in essence, what that represents is that decisions around executive compensation are not going to be made in a vacuum. They're going to be made relative to what other organizations that the board has identified as being comparable, and how those organizations are paying and the practices that are following will influence and be considered by the board as it looks at compensation decisions. And so with performance as the basis, I want to spend some time talking to you about the process that the board, or that the MBEC went through in reaching a consensus on Kevin's evaluation for fiscal year 14-15. First of all members of the board completed a comprehensive study, or comprehensive assessment rather, of Kevin's performance around 10 key competency areas that are listed on the chart. And those range from his ability to provide strategic direction to the organization, his effectiveness as a leader, his ability to focus and direct the organization around quality, his ability to manage change, his ability to create an appropriate environment for the people that count on Erlanger, his effectiveness dealing with external constituencies, particularly governmental officials.
Jose, could you pause for just a moment? Thanks.
Please enter your meeting ID, followed by number sign. Welcome to the conference call. Please say your name after the tone. You are the only person in the meeting now.
Just a second.
Sorry, we're trying to get one of our colleagues
Okay.
connected, and so. It's okay.
You can go for
I
it.
can proceed?
Yes.
And
We'll
so-
be interrupted one more time when he calls in.
It's our, it's coded. And so just to round out the categories, the assessment also included his effectiveness in terms of medical provider relationships, as well as his effectiveness as a CEO in dealing with this board. And the board going through this assessment also relied on the same assessment that was completed in advance by members of the medical leadership of Erlanger, as well as executive management. And so the point of all this is that this is a robust process with lots of individuals participating, answering both structured questions as well as having the ability to make comments to open-ended questions. And so the result of that is that on average, Kevin's performance on a 5-point scale averaged out at 4.5, which is consistent with the score that he received going through this same process as it related to the prior fiscal year. Moreover, the board was able to consider a report that was submitted by Kevin to them, which outlined a series of accomplishments in his views as he reflected back over the prior fiscal year. And so he noted certainly continued improvements in quality and safety indicators, and you'll recognize, if you recall back to our last discussion around incentives, you saw an improvement in those areas. The financial results, I don't need to tell you how strong that has been. You've managed to gain share in a market that's not growing, and so you are certainly finding ways to win. Significant investments in the clinical information system, and that implementation of that process has begun. A number of contract negotiations have been settled, as well as expanded service and physician alignment, and not to mention Erlanger being recognized publicly for some of its accomplishments. So all this was part of the data points, if you will, that led to that particular conclusion. So that was the performance side. The market side is the compensation that will be recommended is based on an understanding of what other national not-for-profit health systems that have certain similarities to Erlanger, and most significantly similarities in size, perhaps similarities in organizational complexity, as well as in the markets that they operate in. Okay, this is a group of 50 organizations that met some of these general criteria. They start with some that may be half as small to others that are twice as large, and that's a fairly conventional approach that certainly compensation consultants would take in developing a peer group. And so as important as what's in this group is to recognize what is not in the group. And so certainly any for-profit health systems, any for-profit businesses, anyone from general industry would be excluded. Organizations that are predominantly either health plans or children's hospitals or specialty hospitals, they're also excluded, as are organizations that exist in markets where executive compensation or the cost of labor is significantly higher than the national marketplace. And so that would be markets like the New York metropolitan area, California, Boston, and so forth.
Jose, one quick
Yes.
clarification on that. Understand the larger metro areas being excluded, that's a skew to the upside. The other things being excluded, do those skew lower compensation or higher compensation?
So if you included for-profit healthcare, or you included general industry, that would push the numbers up dramatically.
Okay.
Okay. And the others are not included because they're simply very different forms of organization. So a health plan is principally an insurance organization. Pediatrics are pediatrics, and post-acute is really a different business. And so, while we would like to find organizations that are precisely like Erlanger, we're limited in a couple ways. You could argue that no one is like Erlanger, but you're also limited by the very practical concern is that the data has to be available. okay? And so if you think about other public quasi-governmental hospitals, if they're not required to submit to federal tax filings where executives' compensation is disclosed, there's no way where that information is available unless they voluntarily participate into a compensation survey, okay? And so the market, if I may use that term, is comprised of 50 health systems. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through this. By the way, this is the same list that I shared with you last year. But I will point out a couple things. Erlanger, on this page, this is probably the first 2025, Erlanger is bigger than every one of these, okay? So this is showing you that we're also looking at organizations that are smaller than Erlanger. Why is that relevant? Very simple. In every industry, including this one, organizational size, okay, absolutely predicts executive compensation. Okay? So said differently, the bigger the organization, the more you're going to pay. The smaller the organization, the less you're going to pay. And frankly, a lot of the other variables are pretty insignificant in that. And so you'll see that there's some that are in the region. Mississippi Baptist is over in Jackson. I think you guys all would recognize West Tennessee Healthcare. A couple others, Georgia Regents over in Augusta. Okay, so there's a blend. You can see it's a national marketplace. Okay, we're not trying to get geographic parity. Okay, because we're always balancing who is in against having a sufficient number of data points so that we can reflect the fact that it is a market. And then here's the rest of the list. And so Erlanger is going to hit somewhere in this area here. Okay? And so again, the Infirmary Health System in Mobile, many similarities. We also want to call it Grady in Atlanta is also in this mix. And so, on balance, Erlanger is $668 million on a net revenue top line basis, and you'll see that the average for the group is in the same range. So we have controlled for size to give you some assurances that we are in fact reflecting a market that Erlanger is comfortably within. So let me set up the recommendation. First of all, it's important to know that in the peer group that I just shared with you for 2015, so up to this point, these organizations have already made compensation adjustments on average of about 3% in salary to their CEOs. And furthermore, they are expected to make another 3% adjustment in 2016. Okay? Because remember, every organization here has their own timing for their process, and the data that we're sharing with you is specific to a point in time. Okay? And so Kevin's current salary is $748,000. Okay? Currently, he ranks 25th out of 50th, so he is precisely in the middle of that group. Okay? Following the evaluation that I just described, and as a result of the rating that was recommended by the MBEC, the Management and Board Evaluation Committee is recommending a 7% salary increase. Okay? Now, the way to think about this increase, in my view, is the first 3% of this, okay, simply keeps him consistent with this market. So he would not be losing ground, because recognizing that as we go forward, other organizations are going to continue to pay. And so I projected 3%. That keeps him in the same spot. The other 4%, I think the way to think about it is clearly in recognition of his performance. And so that's the pay for performance premium that the MBEC is providing through this recommendation. And so as a result of that, the recommended salary would be $800,400, which would then move him temporarily to 17th out of 50th on that list. And furthermore, if the annual incentive plan under which he is currently operating under, if he were to achieve the target level payout, okay, would bring his total cash target to just above $1 million, which would rank him 12th on the list. Now, I'll remind you that in the 2 years that have been the plan, because of the stretch goals that get established, he is yet to earn at that level. So the projection may be he may earn 95 to 100% of that number in 16 if the pass continues to hold.
Jose, like at 17th out of 50, but that's before all those other CEOs got their raise.
That's correct, because we don't know when they're getting their raises.
So if you factor that in,
Right, so that's,
then this would be back down in maybe
right.
22,
He's gonna,
23.
well, yeah, so he would.
He'll move up some, but
Right.
not to the 17th level.
Right, so he'll be somewhere between 17th and 25th.
Right.
Okay, depending on the performance of those other CEOs. Okay, so again, this is a point-in-time analysis. You understand that that world continues to move, and boards continue to go through their processes and make decisions. So the point of all this is, I think it's clear that it's performance-based. It's a rigorous process. The performance should not be surprising. You've been through the incentive plan results. You've seen that. You get the reports. You have the market data. And again, the rationale is 3% of that keeps pace with the market, and the other 4% of that is, in essence, recognition for his performance. And so with this action today, you will close out the 2015 executive compensation cycle, which is another way of saying this action is in recognition of the performance and the contributions and the leadership that he has already delivered. Okay? It's not prospective. Excuse me. Happy to take any questions.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
at what point would we know the true ranking? You said that this is in reference to past history, that 17th and 12th. When will we know what the market is?
Yes, our database would update next summer. Okay,
But that's a moving target. I mean, it's.
it's a moving target, right? Yeah, so what I'm showing to you is this is not static. This will change. Okay? You know, what I'm concerned about is not so much the precise position, okay? But given the facts and circumstances here, and given the performance, is that an appropriate place? Because remember, last year there was, you made a fairly significant move. He was not at 25th. Okay? He was closer to the bottom quarter than he is the middle. Okay? So you made a strong move to close the gap this year. I think this year you're recognizing that, one, you're going to keep pace, but two, you're also going to send a message around the performance that's been delivered.
So the 25th is where he ended up this summer.
That's where he's at the moment. That's
At the
correct,
moment.
at the moment. So if you don't do, if you did nothing, okay, he would drop, he's gonna drop just by virtue of the fact that.
By next summer.
By next summer, he would drop, because again, the projections are that the market is gonna move 3%.
How do you see the balance? I think in other presentations we've seen before, there's a balance between salary and incentive pay. Does this recommendation keep us in that balance
Yeah.
where we need to be?
Right, so he would be, so if he hit all the goals at target, he would be 12th with this recommendation, with the incentive plan that has already been approved and that he is currently working under. Okay, so what you're setting up as a structure is for him.
Well, I guess I was asking more the balance between base pay
Yeah.
and incentive pay.
Right,
Does that make sense?
yes, so his incentive opportunity
Mhm.
is consistent with the average of these CEOs in this group. So we're not any more aggressive in terms of the opportunity, okay? Now, the great variable is the actual performance.
Sure.
And that goes back to goal setting, and what you can't ever calibrate is how tough the goals are here versus where they are anyplace else. I can only tell you, given the past history, that there should be no sense that the goals are easy here, okay? Because if you think back, there's always red on that table. Right.
Other questions? Very good. Thank you, Jose.
Thank you.
Okay, so just a few more thoughts from my board colleagues. So as Jose mentioned, if we were to take action on this resolution that has been brought to the board this evening by the MBEC, which is recommending a 7% salary increase for Mr. Spiegel, we do close out his cash compensation for fiscal year 2015. But I would remind everybody that cash compensation is just one element of the total package that we're responsible for in terms of Mr. Spiegel's employment. So there's compensation, but there's also conditions of employment in his contract, and I'll like to come back around to that for just open discussion after this, if we could. With regard to the resolution, MBEC met over a month ago and reviewed everything that Jose just talked about. So this recommendation, hopefully all of you have had a chance to think about over the last month or so, and if you had any other thoughts or questions, I know I got a few, so thank you for asking me about them. But with that, I would like to present to the board for your consideration Resolution 151001, which in effect would make Mr. Spiegel's salary, which would in effect give Mr. Spiegel a salary raise for fiscal year 2016 of plus 7%, and that would be retroactive to July 1st.
You've heard the resolution, recommendation. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion? Second?
Second.
Second. And I would like to say, just from my perspective, I think Kevin's performance, when I looked up there and I saw 25th out of 50, it's not average. So I hope this will bump you up somewhat above average. The numbers were a little confusing because when you see the 17, that's comparing the 17% where you are, but there's a time lag with that. So I just hope that we, because you're not an average performer and your team is not an average performer, so I would like to just make that comment. Any other comments or discussion? Not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I do have one ongoing request, and that is as we move forward with incentive pay, et cetera, that we remember to include the employees and not just the management team in said structure.
Very good. And I think that is, I won't speak, but I think that's in the works.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
Because I'm very, I mean, you all know, and I've been on this for 6 years on this board about pay for performance, but I recognize, and bearing in mind what Jose just said about it's not common in healthcare organizations, could maybe you explain to us like just what the process is that's required for us to be able to get our heads around what it would take to do something like that here, given the roles that we have and the structure that we currently have?
Jose, did you want to say anything? I'll be glad to. Over the past 2 years, Jan Keese, Dr. Jan Keese has worked on the RNs, the bedside RNs. And I would refer to the program that has been put in place for the bedside RNs, which includes 1,000 to 1,200 individuals, as a competency-based program where you have a level 1, 2, 3, 4 nurse plus a touch of pay for performance. And that's how I would peg that program. So as we move through the organization, we have to ask ourselves, is it a true pay for performance, or is it more of a competency-based program, a compensation program that would work best in the various departments or the various professional lines of our business? So I think first we have to move through the organization and ask what would be most effective, what would be most meaningful for what we're attempting to accomplish, mission and vision, and the care of our patient. So
Can I
it
pause you
may
for just
not.
a second? You mentioned competency-based, and I just want to make sure I understand that correctly. So would that be like where, you as a manager are reviewing someone's behavior and outcomes over the course of the year and saying, Greg, you did great, you get a 5% raise next year. Jennifer, you just performed just about average expectations, you get a 3% raise. So in that sense, there's an incentive to perform more, but it's not based on an incentive plan like this. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it is more at an individual level, and so as nurses build skills, or anyone potentially would build skills, over the course of time and through education, continued education, through experience, and they build additional competencies to be able to, handle and manage more advanced situations in the organization. That's building their competencies. So it's not necessarily an incentive plan that would apply equally across all boundaries. Now that would be another option. So I think we need to ask ourselves, is it more individual based? Is it competency? Is it pay for performance? And we may need a mixture of that because of the type of professionals that we have throughout the organization. One size may not fit all, if I can word it that way. And another alternative is to develop more of a collective corporate-wide program such as we have for management. And I think we just need to work through that process to see what would lend itself to best aligning the compensation of our employees with where we want the organization to move and where we want their focus to be.
I know it is tough to, I mean, when I first came on board, I thought, why can't we have pay for performance for all employees? Then I figured out y'all have 4,000 employees, is that right? And so I finally realized it is tough to, I mean, you could do it by department, you could do it by groups, I guess, but, individually, it's a different world you guys live in.
Jose, do you happen to know if other organizations do some kind of modified form of healthcare, like management by objectives, where your annual, like if you have a salary, your annual salary increase is clearly tied to your performance, but it's not an incentive plan like this?
Yeah, that would be more common.
Okay.
To have a merit, generally referred to as a merit plan, where whether you're measuring objectives or you're measuring competencies, the manager is formally assessing the employee's performance, and the higher performers will get a better increase than those that are in the middle. And so if you want to think of the workforce, the top 20% may get a substantially better increase than the next 70%, and maybe the bottom 10% of the performers would not get anything. Now, it's a very simple model to explain, but very hard model to execute, because to the point of the amount of resources that are required, the amount of management training that has to occur, the cultural implications on our workforce. And so, not to dissuade you, but you have to be prepared that there's going to be some disruption within the organization. Culture. That's different than what I think we're being talked about here, which is putting them in a formal incentive arrangement like the executives. The only thing is, I would caution you to go into this thing with your eyes open and know exactly what you're asking for. Because what happens in those models, what ends up happening is the base wage budgets have come down. And so by virtue of the ability to pay an incentive plan, you're putting a portion of your base increase at risk. And I suggest to you, before you go there, you go out to the workforce and socialize and say, how much are you willing to put at risk relative to how much more you're going to get?
And then you have a problem of consistency throughout the organization by the management team.
Right. And then you've got to weigh whether that's a favorable model than to what you just did, which is because you had such strong performance on a discretionary basis, you shared in that success with the workforce. There are a lot of ways to skin this. There's not a perfect model. There are trade-offs in every one of them.
If you find one, come back to us, okay?
I'm quite sure our management team's going to find one.
You think so?
Donnie?
Yes.
Can I just address the
Sure.
other come background? Because so first of all, we are looking for a date for a final MBET for 2015. So for those of you on the committee, Kitty and I will be reaching out to you shortly. And in that meeting, I think it's very important that we actually address other elements of the condition of the CEO's employment. And so not just the salary and the incentive, which we've been focused on these last couple of sessions, but also we need to be thinking about other areas of compensation. So for example, there are elements of deferred compensation in Mr. Spiegel's contract, which we haven't talked about in a while, that are important. There are things like, and especially this has been on my mind, quite common with high-performing CEOs are retention bonuses. And when you have long-term plans in place, like big capital expansions, or really trying to shift talent, shift in the types of patients we have coming in and the focus on different service lines, those things take time to bear fruit. They're not a year-to-year necessarily. You plan it year one and you get it year two. And so I really think that MBEC needs to be seriously taking a look at the holistic picture of Mr. Spiegel's compensation and include those kinds of things in our next conversation. And I've asked already Jose and his colleagues to come back to us with some examples and recommendations on where we could potentially be, quite frankly, falling short if we are, in terms of, other things that are out there in the marketplace for top performing CEOs, and have a great discussion about that, so that going into 2016, we can be expeditious if there's anything that we'd like to address. I'd also like us to be talking about terms of employment. So if you all will recall, when Mr. Spiegel first came to work here, it was a 3-year contract with a 1-year renewal. We changed that to a 2-year renewal last year. Well, he'll be in year 3. So we're already approaching, I know it seems like yesterday, but we're already approaching the final year of that, and I think we should be seriously considering, as a board, retention, because that's a risk that we have to manage as well. It's not just compensation. And it's important for a board to let a CEO know when the board stands behind him or her, and that's important for Wall Street to know, because they look at things like length of contract and can we rely on the fact that this individual is around to see through the strategies that they have in place. And so we really need to spend some time on those things in MBEC and come out with a clear point of view on what changes we probably should be making to those items. So I just wanted to raise that to the board for everyone to start thinking about it.
Will that MBEC meeting probably be November or
It'll
December?
probably be either, if it's not mid-November, it'll be like second week of December.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Ms. Stanley. Mr. Taylor, you got to pass Monday night, since we did not have the budget and finance meetings, but I asked that you give us at least a summary report. A good
Thank you.
quarter. We just don't need to keep a good quarter.
Exactly. We want to be able to, and I do have to agree with Ms. Stanley that we just actually got back from our annual Wall Street presentations to Moody's, Fitch, and Assured, and that was, all three asked me that exact question.
Oh, they did, yeah.
During the presentation, so, and that was near the top of their list. So I do thank you for bringing that up, because they do watch that very carefully. This is for the first quarter, which is our July through September. We had a total bottom line of $6.3 million. We had budgeted 4.5 at this point. Prior year was at 7.7. One of the things, when you compare this year to the prior year, if you remember last year, we were getting essential access money that was the DISH money. So in this year, we have not recorded any DISH money at this point yet, because we're still waiting on THA and how to do that, because they're still up in the air about how disproportionate share is going to work within the state of Tennessee. It would once we get that, it's about $700,000 a quarter, so that would be about 2.1 for the first quarter.
I mean, $2,700 a month?
Yeah, 700,000. Yeah, I'm sorry, a month, and it's about $8.5 million for the entire year. So once we get direction on how to do that, as you know, the TennCare waivers up for renewal this coming July 1. That's a very important date for all of us to look at, because that's where this DISH money, the essential access money, the public hospital money, all that is in that TennCare waiver. And so we will keep you up to date on that as well. The THA and the state of Tennessee has a waiver request in as we speak to CMS to allow at least the current pools, which includes DISH, to go through June 30th, 16. It's because right now, based on what the pools expire December, but they feel 99.9% sure that is fine. But until we see it inked, we really, and I'm fairly conservative on how I like to do the financials.
Well, let me make sure I understand. So when will you have clarity on how to book the payments we've received so far?
We should have that by the end of the second quarter, when I present the second quarter information, and that's our goal. For the revenue, you'll see that we did $178 million, which is about a 6% increase over the budget, and a 16% increase over a prior year. And again, keep in mind that net revenue number does exclude that DISH monies that I was talking about earlier. So where did that increase come? Well, we actually, from a volume standpoint, did quite well in the first quarter on our admissions and our inpatient surgical procedures. In fact, for September, we had a very good month going at that point. You can see from a admissions point of view for the monthly, and this is total system, that we exceeded budget in prior year. If you look at the different campuses, you'll see that for the BH Adult Hospital, not only did we exceed budget, but prior year. If you look at children's, We did we were right at budget virtually on every month. We did have less than prior year, and keep in mind though, last year for children's was the huge flu season. If you remember, we had a really, really bad flu season early in the year for children's, and it started very early. So we did budget less admissions this year in children's than we had the previous year, because we don't believe that flu season will be as aggressive as it was in the previous year. On the NICU patient days, you can see, again, still one of the highest. September was one of the highest months. We did have a small drop in July, but August and September continued to be strong as well. On the inpatient side of surgeries, you can see that we have, for the system, we've greater than prior year in our budget. On the adult side, again, better than prior year in budget. And then on our surgical percentages, right at a little over 30%, which is our surgical admissions rate compared to our medical admission rate. On our patient days, you'll see, again, I've highlighted NICU, the ICUs at BEH and routine. Children's for routine and pediatric were under budget in Early North. And for the neonatal ICU, that's a good thing. But sometimes on the adult side, seeing that increase in patient days is not necessarily good, because if you look at our length of stay, we're a little above what we expected. As you can see that for the last 3 months, we have been above budget in prior year. And why is that important? If you remember, we get paid on a DRG case payment. So the longer the patient is beyond the expectation of being in the hospital, the more costly that admission is. And I think when you go to the cost per adjusted admission slide, you'll see that reflected in some of those costs.
Sorry, you're doing the summary very well.
Okay.
Back on the surgery mix slide, what was the spike in June? That just seemed a little bit abnormal.
Let's see.
I think it was June. Yeah, right there.
Right there?
No, one more.
One
The
more?
other direction.
That one right there?
No, the one with the trend line. Sorry. One more. There.
Yes.
What was the spike in June?
Actually, it went up 4% because of this. If you look at the volumes, it went up as well. So what a surgical percentage is, it shows you the number of surgery patients we had to total admissions. So what happened, if you look for the month of June, we had a significant amount of surgeries, and the patient, so the total admissions didn't rise as much, so your percentage of surgical patients to total admissions was higher. So when it went back down, you can see that the percentage also dropped back down as well. Okay. But that was an unusual month for surgeries. What we saw, and it's based on when the surgeons, especially on your elective procedures, actually schedule those procedures. So what we saw was a lot of activity in the month of June prior to physicians and going on vacation in the July month. Okay. So you will see a condensed version of lots of activity, and then for elective.
So that's kind of why July and August were a little good.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly.
Okay. Because there will be times when you have and so that's why it's so important when that happens that our surgery department flexes down accordingly as well. Because if you don't flex down, then your fixed cost just stays flat at that point. But you will normally see that in some of the months. What you'll also see a pickup is usually at the end of the year. So when we come to December, when I show these same graphs, because at the end of the year, people are meeting their deductibles, and they want to get that last surgery in before that deductibles or that copay and deductibles reset January 1, we see a lot of activity of surgical procedures, especially on the elective side, to get done as well. So you'll see that same little uptick in the month of December.
What happened to the volume in North, Erlanger North last month? It's about 50% of budget.
Yeah, if you remember, we opened in the budget, we opened those new beds, right, and we projected a 75% occupancy rate, and we're not achieving that particular occupancy at this point with North. But that was based on that capacity, and the ops team are looking at that to make sure that we're utilizing those beds, making sure they're staffed correctly, because if the patient's not there, we have those nurses. What's kind of good about that is, even though the statistics shows it's down, that when we can, when we don't need those beds staffed, we can pull those nurses downtown or at our East Campus, because they're actually cross-trained, because those north patients are usually the less acuity patients, so you can actually move those to the downtown or East Campus. Yes?
One other question on the previous slide, I may have just not read it correctly, but the NIC unit east and downtown went down and east went up, is that right?
Well, the neonatal ICU, actually downtown went up 16%, which is this number here. And the east NICU was under budget by 6%.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. But that facility is probably drawing some of the ones from down here, that would have come down here.
Yes, and actually, because a lot of times we want some of those patients, the less acuity, to be out there, because when you have a capacity issue that sometimes we have in the neonatal ICU, it's best to have those low acuity babies at our East Campus versus downtown, where you have the infrastructure to support that more acute baby. Looking at outpatient surgery, you can see that for the first month we were over budget, but the last 2 months we've been slightly under, greater than prior year, but slightly under, and we're looking at that to, we still believe that our year-to-date budget will be met by the end of the fiscal year. Observation days, we're still running at that 5%. And on this one, keep in mind that we really don't want to see this one grow dramatically. Because on an observation patient, if you remember, the payments are not very good. And as insurance companies want patients into this status, we want to make sure that the patients meet that inpatient criteria and based on the doctor's orders. So this particular area, we have a lot of fight going back and forth with insurance companies, but our doctors have done a wonderful job of documentation to ensure that they meet that inpatient criteria. But this one we will continue to fight, but still fairly good outcome. On the bursts, you can see for the first quarter we're under budget 4%, greater than prior year at 1.7. Physician practices under budget by 5.6%. However, we're greater than 16% prior year, but that is because of all the new additions that we have brought on within the physician practices. If you look at ER visits, 1.2%. East continues to just expand. You can see that they had a 14% increase over budget and a 20% over prior year. We had budgeted increases there. If you look just at budget and the prior year number, we had budgeted 300 more visits during that first quarter, but it's continuing to exceed our expectation, and that community really has gone behind that particular facility. On the ambulance and helicopter transports, you can see ambulance transports continue to be over 1,700. And then the helicopter flights pretty much somewhat in line with the prior years at this point. But again, if you look past the previous years from October through April, still above where we were in the prior year. On our net patient revenue per adjusted admission, you can see that we're at a higher amount. Again, this is driven a lot by your type of inpatient surgical procedures. We are seeing a good mix there. We're also seeing a decrease in the bad debt, and when we get to that graph in a moment, I'll refer back to that. However, in addition to the net patient revenue per adjusted admission, we are seeing an increase in our cost per admission, and so we're continuing to manage that and try to maximize that growth potential and not spend the additional margin. I know that the operations team led by Rob and Jan are coming up with additional plans to ensure that we're managing that growth appropriately, because you can sometimes get out in front of that growth too quick. And so they are coming up with those ideas to manage the growth to ensure that our expenses don't outpace our revenues. On the utilization by quarter, you can see 33% commercial as right on target. And just a reminder, and I know I sometimes keep reminding this, but keep in mind from a governmental public hospital to have this type of payer mix is really, really good. Because if you compare us to some of the other public hospitals out there, a lot of times they'll have less than 20% commercial pay. A lot of theirs will be Medicaid and indigent and Medicare, but to have a 33% payer mix on commercial is dramatic. If you remember our fiscal year end results from last year, we had a 12% increase in commercial discharges. So that's dramatic at that point.
Would it be fair to say that shift, that growth in that is market share moving?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we know the market's not growing, but the commercial payers
Yes.
are coming here now?
Absolutely, and
That's what I mean.
specifically in the region. When we do analysis by zip code level and look at it, and I can't tell you that how important that outreach business development team has been to the
So it's
success.
not just in Chattanooga?
No,
it's the
absolutely. And those affiliation agreements that we have done, you've heard a lot of discussion about the auto accept policy. That has been a huge positive to our market, and really has made a huge difference. And if you think about that market out there, that's where that commercial pay is coming, because we believe, and it varies, it can vary, the raw number can vary a little, but we believe that the Medicaid and TennCare and the self-pay patients we get. So it's really going out to those areas and ensuring that we're meeting their needs to make it easy to come to Erlanger, and that's paid off. And I don't think we've even seen the full impact, because we just put, the field helicopter at Winchester, which is that regional strategy. We've also moved the helicopter from the downtown base to Cleveland. So when you look at our regional market, you're actually seeing a very good strategy circling our primary and secondary service areas, and then keep in mind also that these actual results does not take into consideration the projects that we got with the bond money. That to me is going to be a game changer as well when we open up that orthopedic center of excellence floor, in the February-March timeframe, and then the vascular floor, which, Erlanger has always struggled in that particular center of excellence, and I think it's going to be a huge disruptor to this market. And then once we get Erlanger East online in December of 2016, I think that we're going to see the exact same result that we're seeing with the ED for our Erlanger East Hospital. I mean, people, the East ED has exceeded our expectation dramatically. On the bad debt and charity care, you'll see that we've actually dropped down to nearly 6% on that, and so that helps us on that net revenue number that we talked about earlier. First quarter total expenses, we were 4% over budget. Again, 18% over where we were last year. And that's where Rob and Jan's team is going to be looking at and digging down and coming up with those action plans to ensure that we're getting the most contribution margin from that incremental net revenue number. The net revenue per adjusted admission is above our budget, and again, some of it is driven by specialty of patient that we're seeing and into that. But again, we're looking at plans to continue to monitor that, obviously, to get that closer to what our expectation is. On our salaries, 2% over our budget. And if you look at what is causing some of that overage, volume obviously is one of them, but our paid FTEs per adjusted occupied bed is actually under budget. And pretty much, and I love that trend line as we see, because it continues to get more efficient, more effective with better quality outcomes, and that's really the goal. The one thing, though, you have to be careful on this particular ratio. It's per occupied bed, which means that's per patient day. However, if the length of stay is longer, you really are not generating any savings, because if you do a paid FTE per admission, that's where you look if you compare it to the reimbursement. So we just got to keep that in mind. Now, our salary cost per hour, you can see it did, July started with a new budget year, and that has the market adjustment raises that we did. So for the first couple of months, we were doing quite well, and then in September, we're a little over, nothing to get dramatically worried about. But again, I know you love seeing this slide. And so doing much better on the relief, because that gap is not as big as we've seen. but still struggling on the overtime and callback. And so that's really some of the effort that's looking at now and ensuring that those are managed. Because you've got to manage, if you remember, these are your premium hours and the premium rates that we're paying. And if we can mark that out, you're at least paying time and a half. And in some of these differentials, it can be 2 and 2.5 times based on if they're working weekend, third shift, et cetera. So this is one of the areas that the ops team's looking at. Supplies and drugs, 13%. And again, this is for the last 3 months, even though we're a little above budget, again, if you look at the surgical procedures we're doing, like orthopedics will normally have a higher cost per admission than you would a general surgery case. So we're looking at to make sure the reimbursement is appropriate and covers for that. But it is still not at some of these high peaks that you've seen in the previous months. If I look at other purchase services, $960,000 for purchase services. This is where a lot of the legal costs are and some of the maintenance issues that's in that number. The utilities for $413,000. Usually by year end, it's very hard to get that utility spread right. But usually by year end, we're on budget. And then the insurance and taxes, $29,000. From a net days and accounts receivable, you can see we're still under 50. Again, give you just a real quick ICD-10 update. As you know, that went live October 1. So far, knock on wood, we've not had any major issues. All of our bills have went out. They have went through the clearinghouse. We have talked to our 3 major payers, Cigna, United, and Blue Cross. They have received them. They're so far not having any errors, and we should be getting remittances back this week. So tomorrow and Monday and Tuesday, in fact, I was at a Blue Cross meeting earlier today, and they pulled up some claims for me to see, and so far we're not experiencing the craziness yet, but I should be able to report back at the November budget and finance where we are and how we did within ICD-10. But again, first pass looks like that no major significant material hiccups at this point. The big payer that I'm still worried about is Cahaba, which is our Medicare regarding, because they really, that's the one we were worried that would not be ready. The positive about Medicare, if you remember, we're a PIP hospital. What does that mean? Is that we get bi-weekly payments, and then at the end of the year, the bi-weekly payments are reconciled to what you actually did. So from a cash flow standpoint, we're fine. But again, when they get behind processing the remittances, you can imagine how difficult that makes the reconciliation process at year end when you're not only dealing with 3 weeks of claims, you're dealing with months and months of claims, and it gets difficult. So, but we will definitely keep you up. In fact, looking at some of the industry blogs, I'm not seeing any major disruptions in any major municipality at this point with ICD-10. So let's keep our fingers crossed that continues. The team, the revenue cycle team, did a tremendous job. A lot of hours of work. And we've even got a third party reviewing a sample of our claims to make sure not only are they coded with ICD, but they're coded appropriately and there's no missing documentation. So I think we've tried to cover our bases for all that. Finally, on our social responsibility report, around $22 million. If you times that by 4, we're still in excess of the $80 million the uncompensated care that we're doing. And we continue to see that. So that sort of goes back to my original comment of those self-pay and Medicaid TennCare patients. I think we do have that market because this number is not fluctuating at all. And this is a raw number, so it really tells you what that's all about at that point. Again, first good quarter. We had a very good, and Kevin's going to mention it in his report about our Wall Street presentation. And I hope to come back in January and give you a very positive report on our second quarter as well.
Very good. Questions? If we'd added in the $700,000 per month, we would be about 700 ahead of last year on the bottom line.
That's correct.
But the only concern that I have is that you we had 25 million on the top line, and we only dropped 700,000 extra to the bottom line.
That is correct. And
So
that's
that
exactly,
squeeze.
yeah, and that's what Rob and Jan is looking at for
Right.
that individual contribution margin and their action plans to address that.
But I think that also adds into our reinvestment, not only in the infrastructure, but in the workforce.
Well, you can see it, my biggest, you look at the salary cost. When you
Yep.
took everybody to market, even though we're only 2% ahead of budget was based on
That-
big increases.
That's what happened.
So you're,
Yep.
there's where probably half of that slippage has been.
Right.
And one thing, I don't really know how to frame a question on it, but the ICD-10 could be there could be some lagging indicators from productivity. I know
Yep.
we were concerned about that,
Mhm.
so
Right.
when you come back and update us on the financial side of it,
Yep.
I'd love to hear an update from
it's a big
from the
issue.
ground floor.
Yep.
How annoyed is everybody by this new process?
And I'm
Really
amazed that
annoying.
East.
Yeah, it seems really annoying.
I'm amazed that East is growing like it is with all the disruptive construction going on.
Correct.
That, I figured normally, when you have construction projects like that, it impacts.
There's a disruption because it looks like a construction
It
site.
looks like I can't get in there.
Right.
So,
And unfortunately, it is in front of the building.
I know.
It's by and so there is and if you look at that campus, we're doing construction on all three major elements, on both entrances, as well as the middle of the campus. And that is an issue. But I do think that when we get those investment opportunities that we have built a lot of our strategy on, I think we're going to really show some very good continued results, even better than what we put in here. If we continue to do what we did at the East Campus of what we saw in the ED regarding the payer mix, it's going to be tremendous.
thank you very much, Britt.
Donnie?
Yes.
I had some comments that I was going to make about the financial statements, but I think Britt's did a good job of addressing those comments that I had. Plus, he had a couple of rabbits pulled out of his pocket over there that I didn't know about. Pretty good.
Yeah, Henry had sent me some of his thoughts earlier today, and appreciate you addressing.
No, they were right on target. Right on target.
Right.
Thank you.
Ms. Stanley, the board self-evaluation, I don't like that self-evaluation.
Why
I really
not?
don't. Because I
Why?
take it personally, but go ahead.
You're meant to.
I know it.
So hopefully everyone had a chance to look at the collective results of the self-evaluation that you did recently. This also falls in MVEC, by the way. I know we spent a ton of time talking about, as we should, management evaluation and compensation, but we also need to talk about our own evaluation of our own performance. And there were a few things, and with that said, I wanted to use this time to do two things. One, to invite comment from all of you, my colleagues, in particular about a few of the common threads that I saw throughout the evaluations. One was around just efficiency of meetings and how we get information and whether or not there's anything we might want to change up for next year. And the second one was around how we actually absorb information. So I think everybody recognizes this is a really complex place. It can take a while of actually being on the board before you actually really have a good sense of what's going on. And even then, there's still a lot of things that are hard to kind of keep up with. And so I just noticed that those were kind of comments that wound their way through. It seems like we typically feel like we work pretty well as a board, but if there's opportunities for us to be more efficient, I would love to hear if folks have thoughts on those, because we have a chance to change it for the new year.
One of the things that I know has been, or would be helpful, I don't know how we manage this as a board with some of the requirements we have about meetings and not meetings and that, is more opportunities for informal, workday informal interaction with the management team. I know, a lunch where you can talk about specific things, coming to some meetings here on campus during the day, not board meetings, but business meetings. Things like that, I think if we can try and make those more available, just, kind of on an ad hoc basis. I know, and again, trying to stay in the green zone of not having board meetings that aren't board meetings, but one-on-one stuff I know is really helpful for me. That's where I've learned a lot about how the hospital works from all of you.
I'll tell you one suggestion that I have, but I don't know how practical it is because we have some physicians on our board. But other boards I am on, well, just one other that does this. They have a committee day or a committee half a day, where you get all your committees done in one day, so that you're not running back and forth to the hospital. I know for some of you that work here, it's not that big a deal, but if I've got somebody that lives across town or something, coming in at different times for committee meetings, if the new chairman, wants to look at maybe doing something like that, and you have your committee meetings before your board meeting. And we've kind of gravitated toward that a little bit, like we stacked up 3 of them, I think, today. And I don't know, that would be one suggestion. Another, go ahead.
No, you go.
I've got 3 things, and then mine will be quick. We didn't do well in communication. The trouble is, I live in a world of email, but if Mr. Woodard has so correctly cautioned me, if I send out an email to my board members on a thought, and any one of my board members hit reply to all, we've violated the Sunshine Law, because that is a discussion with a quorum that we can't have without public notice. So in my world of communicating with other folks, I easily email all the time.
That's called the normal world.
That's the normal world. But in this world, you can't do that. And so, and if you do send out an email, I live in fear that somebody's going to hit reply to all. So I don't know how to overcome that, Mr. Counselor. Yeah. Yep.
Well, while we're on that topic, I think another one that along those lines that we should probably think about or address or discuss or dig into more is the ability to remotely attend meetings.
I'd love the bylaws to be changed.
You know, I think we need to do some research on it, but I don't know if that's a decision that this board can collectively agree to extend that and allow for teleconference voting, or I'd love to see like teleconference, like visual video conferencing if we could. That isn't as hard as it used to be 5 years ago, but that could make, especially for committee meetings,
Oh, God.
if they're not all in one day, that could be a huge boost in attendance. So
Yeah, we can't, Jack, I mean, we can do it telephonically, we can do video conferencing, but under
You can't vote.
You can't vote, and you don't count toward the quorum.
Why is that? Because when I talk to our state legislators, they say they can do that and they can vote.
Yep,
They can,
that's
we
true.
can't.
There's an attorney general's opinion that says that we can't, it's limited.
Now, is that just for, that's not our bylaws, but that's
That's-
all public
that's
hospitals in the state?
law, yes, sir.
So they'd have to change that?
Yes, sir.
So, but I think they're willing to work with us and
Yeah.
understand since
I
they
think
do
that
it.
would be.
people that write the laws change the laws.
That's
Yeah,
exactly right.
so I'll follow up on that.
That'd be great, because I can understand, like, you want to see someone's face to know that they're the ones actually casting the vote, but there are ways in this day and age to make that happen.
Yeah, Brett Nolsky.
And then my only other thing was, I think the chairman, I need to do a better job of orienting our new board members. I think I have not done a good job of that in the past, at least the past couple of years. So, so the new chairman needs to correct my sins and get back on track with that. Nita?
Well, I think I have 3 things. One of them was the video, because I think we are so far behind every other industry. And we'll have to get our legal counsel and our legal representatives statewide to help us facilitate that, so that I think it's in everyone's best interest that as many of us attend meetings as we can, and that we are stay informed as we can, with overseeing a $500 million corporation. The second thing is what everybody may not realize, and I wore Donnie out with back earlier, and now, I think Henry's doing it, is we frequently send questions ahead of time. So we have a lot of questions, and almost too well, they will answer them so it looks like we're just like, yeah, good. Well, so they've kind of incorporated that, and we probably need to be, like Henry did allude to the fact that we had some questions that we wanted answers to tonight, because I think that works very effectively. And then one other thing as far as the board, I think we all have a lot of committees that all of us can't get to, so we've got to figure out some way within the, especially if it's a closed one, that we could get information to each other, maybe, because we have a very, very quick peer review thing after this, but at some point, like, just commit talk about what the committees did, so that all of us can stay informed on if we're not on that committee or we missed the committee. And I wanted to record everything and have us sign in virtually so we could kind of keep up with everything that's going on, but we haven't figured out how to do that legally yet. But I think that would be very helpful to be able to sign in. If I couldn't make the planning committee, then be able to click in and, you know, and see what happened during the planning committee, and then I can bring my questions forward. But I don't think we necessarily do a great job of telling everything, like at joint conference, bringing forward all of the quality data for the entire board to look at in our monthly meetings. So,
Good
I'm done.
comments. Other comments? Very good.
I have
I think
one.
we scored about the same this year as we did last
We
year.
did. I can't get it pulled back up. I was gonna say.
I
think
was
the
trying to
score's
do
about
the same thing, but-
But Donnie, just on your point, when you said you need to do a better job of board member orientation, I would take some exception to that, because I don't think that it's like on the shoulders of any one person. I actually think that from a committee perspective, all of us who are chairs of committees, when we hand that over to another person, like, we should orient that person to, this is how this committee works, and let me tell you what's gone down in the last year that you may have missed. So maybe I would just amend that and say collectively, we can do a
We
better
can all
job
do a
of
better job.
educating one another. We do have the opportunity, at least in terms of how we meet and what are standing committees or ad hoc within certain limits, and Jeff will keep us honest on what those limits are, though, to change our bylaws. And so the legal committee is going to tackle this in a more comprehensive and kind of major way starting January. So if you have other ideas and you're thinking about this, and Nita, thank you for the push on remote participation. I know I would greatly appreciate that, but other things as well will be coming through the legal committee. So if you have a significant interest in that and you're not on legal, we would love to have you join us.
Very good.
Jeff, can I ask a question though too? Just want to, and I know folks are eager to get going, but this whole email and reply all thing, I mean, I get it, but it's super frustrating. And so when we think about just trying to be more informed board members, are there legitimate and lawful ways where we can have more infrequent or informal communication so it doesn't require a meeting like this to have a normal conversation?
Less than a quorum.
Less than a quorum? Okay, so smaller groups.
If we work around the deliberation piece of it.
Yeah.
A voting composite of the board, a quorum.
Yeah.
Deliberating to a decision. And so, I mean, again, there's a lot of gray there, Jennifer.
I know.
You know, I like the BCC all. You know, you put a blind copy you can send out. I mean, and we'll routinely, case comes down or an issue comes up, you know, we'll send that out. You know, just blind copy everyone on it, and then you can't reply to all. You can't get into
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, sir. And so there are ways, Jennifer, that you can get the information out without.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
I want to
You've
be
never
clear,
seen
I'm not
what
talking about.
nobody's name shows up.
I'm
in
talking about
the
like
chat.
simple things, right? Like, there may be 3 or 4 of us who want to know more about days cash on hand. And we want to get together and have a conversation with Britt, and if he sends us an email and we have a clarifying question, like, it's hard to have those kinds of conversations. So, okay, it's good to know, because I'm sure you would appreciate not getting hit up 5 or 6 different times to answer the exact same
I used to
question.
do blind copies.
So,
It's like, no, I'm happy.
He lives for that.
All right, any other?
I need to find my BCC.
yeah, most all emails have it, it's just usually kind of hidden.
Sometimes
Fill everybody in there that you
Sometimes
can't.
it's hidden in
Yeah,
BCC.
like in Gmail, it's hidden
Right.
unless you
I'll find it.
Right.
click it and it pops up.
All right, any other comments?
Mhm.
Thank you, Ms. Stanley.
Thank you.
Moving on down the agenda, Dr. Kern, I did not see this evening. I think he's out, so I don't think we have a chief of staff report. Dean Seberg, I saw him earlier.
He's not here.
Okay, don't have a report there. Mr. Spiegel, that comes to you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. As Britt reported, we had a very strong first quarter. I'm really proud, even performed better than last year, which was a very, very strong year. I'm going to give a brief update on Wall Street. Britt Tabor and myself, we went to Wall Street. We met with rating agencies and our bond insurers. We met with Moody's, Fitch, and Assured Guaranteed, as well as Barclays, our financial advisors who you've met prior. The meetings were extremely positive, and they made comments about our really strong performance, not only financial, but market growth in the region, which they saw as really impressive. And we're awaiting their reports in November. 3D Ops, there was a press conference here at Erlanger. Mayor Coppinger was here, as well as members of the press. There was an article in the Times Free Press regarding Dr. Chris Keel. He's one of our urologists. And this is a device, and what we're using it for is pre-surgical planning, as you have the anatomy as well as cancer and invasion of organs. You could actually map this out in 3D form. Not only do it as a teaching tool for your patients, but in pre-surgical planning of the surgeon, this is very important. And Erlanger is the first hospital-wide study of 3D models in acute patient care. And I think this puts us, again, on not only a local arena, but as a national and international platform, as really cutting-edge technology that we're doing with a Chattanooga-based company. Erlanger East is proceeding as planned. We are scheduled to open up 6 new med-surg beds and 8 call rooms in January. We're scheduled to open up the 4 surgical suites, new cath lab, and 9 recovery rooms, 8 pre and post beds, and a new lobby aggressively by March of this coming year. So that's really exciting. The construction is going well as planned. On this campus, we have 6 new operating rooms for the Orthopedic Surgery Institute, 12 new recovery beds and additional support space, and that should be completed as early as February of next year. I do want to report that Dr. Jan Keys received the ACHE Senior Healthcare Executive of the Year Award at the most recent Tennessee Hospital Association meeting. Mr. Henry Haas was a representative. Not only did he attend all of the trustee meetings, but he was there at the award ceremony. So, congratulations, Dr. Also, I want to acknowledge Mr. Rob Brooks, and he received National Spotlight in Modern Healthcare as one of 12 up-and-comers in the United States in healthcare, and that's a big award. And now myself and Dr. Keys we're gonna, Paul, if you would kick on a video about the flu vaccine season. Just want to mention what we have on our intranet, and hopefully I'll get a couple of laughs. Hi, it's that time of the year again where we need to protect ourselves, our patients, and our families against flu. It is that time of the year, so I want to encourage everybody to get their flu shots. We need to be protecting our patients. We need to be protecting ourselves, and encourage yourself and your families to get immunized today. So I'm here with Dr. Keys, and she's going to give me my shot to kick off this flu season.
Okay, Kevin, just a little stick.
Ow! I'm only kidding, guys. Protect yourself, protect your patients, and protect your family. Have a great flu season.
Very good.
So I encourage everybody to make sure that you got your flu shot. My wife Judy always reminds me to get mine. So, Mr. Chairman, that is my report.
Thank you very much. Good report. A couple other things, and reports from trustees or officers.
I'd like to take one of personal privilege. Okay. And I know this meeting's been long, but what I've got to say takes 1 minute and 43 seconds.
You got it.
And I have to stick to the script so I don't do anything illegal. But I want to address this group, my fellow trustees, Mr. Spiegel, and members of the Erlanger staff. I wanted to take a moment here to address this body regarding information that was shared during recent court proceedings. I'd hoped to be able to correct certain statements when given the opportunity to testify. However, with the settlement, I was unable to do so. In addition to the very public criticism of me from the plaintiff and her lawyer, this institution, the administration, my colleagues, and my family were also criticized. I simply do not believe we can or should ever stand by and allow such criticisms of this institution, the professional staff and trustees who give their time without compensation to go unaddressed. While serving as a trustee of this institution, my commitment, as yours, has been to this hospital, our patients, and this community. The work we do and the decisions we make are often difficult. However, it is because of our integrity and professionalism that we have the respect and confidence of those we serve. Throughout my career, I've exercised professionalism in all of undertaking. I want all of you to know that my commitment has always been to the highest ethical standards. One's reputation and integrity go hand in hand. While mine and others were questioned during the recent litigation, I'm confident that we've emerged stronger than ever. I want to thank you for your kind support of all of you and from my friends. Together we will continue the important mission of Erlanger. Thank you very much.
Well said, and I think you speak for every board member. Now, if a board member is going to make a comment, we are under a disparaging agreement plan. And so if you say anything, it has to be very kind.
That's why I read this.
You did.
If I get
You
off
did a good
script,
job,
I'm in
but-
trouble.
I would like to say that I adore Dr. Miller. She is a treasured friend, and it's been such a pleasure to serve with you and to learn from you. And I couldn't ask for a better board colleague. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and likewise.
You're here.
I'd like to say to you as well, I know it's a difficult task for everybody, but I think it's a doubly difficult task for practicing doctors in our community. And, you know, I appreciate everybody who brings that skill to the board because we all know we need it. There's a lot of acronyms and a lot of knowledge that we as board members don't have, so thank you for doing that. And it's sort of a double whammy because it never ends for you, so thank you doubly for that.
Well, thank you. And we need your expertise, definitely.
Let me know when we find
Not
it.
out there.
Thank you, Dr. Miller.
Thank you.
Well said. I was proud of Henry for going to THA, and I think, Henry, you would encourage all our trustees to go next year?
I would. It was a very good experience for 3 days to participate in that. I'd like to just mention a couple of things that I learned while I was there. I found out that I have 2 very close friends that are on the board at Cookeville, on their hospital board. And they were there at this meeting and got a chance to talk with them, visit with them a little bit. But one of the very first events that they had was a lecture by a doctor who had done quite a bit of research of the medical profession. He's just written a book called The Digital Doctor. If you haven't had a chance to read that or hear about it, I would invite everybody, including particularly all the board members, to pick up a copy of that book and read it. It's very interesting and very eye-opening to me to learn that the electronic medical records has really not been an issue. Well, it's really not been a process in the medical profession up until the last maybe 5 or 6, 7 years. It seems like the medical profession is going into the utilization of electronic records, kicking and screaming and everything else, and making it very interesting, the ease of shifting of data back and forth and making that available to all the different doctors that a patient might see. Secondly, I'd like to just mention I had an opportunity to sit down and talk with Dr. Kofer.
Your conference call will end in 10 minutes.
I'll cut it short.
Okay.
Had a chance to sit down and talk with Dr. Kofer and learn a little bit about what he does and some of the work. And he made me an offer to come and visit with him someday and take a little time to go around and visit some of the floors in the hospital and meet some of the nurses and some of the people that work on them and learn a little bit about safety and about some of the things that he does. And so I'm going to certainly take him up on that, and I'm going to come into the hospital and do that. And I really invite all of the trustees to do that at some point, if you've got a little bit of time and can do that. But that's all I
Very
got.
good. Thank you, Henry, for the encouragement. Don't forget, next month, we will have election of officers. So if you have, want to make a nomination of somebody, check with that person and then let trustee Mike Griffin know, as he will bring those to us next month. Did I forget anything? If you average the long meetings with the short meetings, they're probably normal. So I appreciate your patience tonight as we've had one of those long meetings. This meeting is adjourned.